Welcome to the Dream 100 Show, the epicenter of influence, collaboration, and exponential growth. You're about to discover the power of relationships. Dream 100 relationships. And you're one relationship away from a totally different business and life. This is your host, Michael Tasner.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Dream 100 Show. Today's topic is a continuation of what are some of the tactics, what are some of the strategies that you can use when a recession hits. Now, the last week has been very all over the place by way of the economy. On Monday, we had a big crash, things recovered a little bit, but there is definitely more chatter than I have seen in quite a while about what the heck is going on with the economy. Now, some of you are going to be impacted far greater than others. Now, the asterisk to that is that everyone has been impacted with rising interest rates and inflation and higher taxes and there's a lot of those factors that have been influencing everyone. However, some industries over the next 1, 3, 6, 9, 12 plus months are going to get knocked around a bit more than industries that may not. So what's an example of that? And more importantly, what are some of the things that every one of us can do to make sure that not only do we continue to stay afloat within this recession, that we actually come out on the other side thriving, that we actually enter worse off than when we leave. So how the heck could that happen when there is a big pullback? Wouldn't it be the other way around, where you're coming in and then things are nosediving and you're barely making it out alive? The great thing about down economies is it ends up becoming a marketing play. As I have said and have been teaching episode after episode, everything stems back to marketing. Every single thing. Marketing is going to do a lot of different things in a recession. Let's look at and just take an industry that I believe will do fine or well in a recession, and then let's look at an industry that might get severely impacted. So an industry that I think is going to continue to do well will be anything that has to do with pets. And so, well, what do you mean pets? So dog groomers, for example, doggy daycares, pet spas, pet e-commerce companies. There's a lot of data to show that even when times are tough, people will continue to spend and even spend more on their pets. Businesses that serve children, for example, daycare centers, preschools, childcare centers. As more people go back to work, maybe a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home dad is now going back to work and they're going to need care. You really don't have a ton of other options outside of family, friends, siblings, babysitters, and babysitters, when you start to look at things from a cost perspective, are more expensive than typically most childcare centers. So those are just a couple of industries that I think could do well. Now, if you look at it on the flip side, a lot of people will say, well, the luxury market still is going to hold and stay strong. However, the people that are in that market that I would call the glittering rich, people that don't necessarily have the money, but they want to buy certain things. So high-end or mid-level restaurants, I think, are really going to get crushed. People that are selling mid-level to high-end watches, the watch market has been getting crushed exponentially. Car dealers have been getting crushed and are going to continue to get crushed, in particular, new car sales. If you look at a lot of the discretionary type of purchases, those are the ones that people are going to second guess as long as they don't have to do with their pet or their kids. Those are the two that I still believe will stand the test of time. Now, how do we actually continue to capitalize on this? So last week I told you that this is my favorite time to double and triple down. And the reason behind that is that a lot of businesses, regardless of market, have already started to pull back. They're starting to, maybe I'm not going to redo that website that we were going to do this year, and we're going to save the money and ride this out. yeah, maybe we're going to hold on that advertising campaign. Maybe we're going to start pulling back on our digital ad spend. Maybe we're going to not publish that physical mailing or physical newsletter that we've been sending every quarter for 10 years. We're going to go to digital to save some money. That is already starting to happen, and I can already start to see the data, because outside of the political time when it comes to advertising, so if there's a big election, which there is this year, ad costs tend to go up around certain types of elections and election times. But I'm actually starting to see things falling. Facebook ads, Google ads, TikTok, which means to me that getting and garnering and buying attention is starting to come down. And the only reason that it would be coming down is supply or demand. The supply has not changed. If anything, the supply has continued to increase. More and more new people are getting on all of these other social media platforms day in and day out. There hasn't been 100 million people that have just magically left TikTok. It's been the exact opposite. So if the supply is there and the supply is increasing, what's going on with the demand? Demand is starting to fall because companies are getting nervous. And that is what I believe will create a very, very, very interesting time if you can double down and triple down, because you can start to grab that underpriced attention. And what ends up happening is before that competitor knows it, you just started to grab their market share because they started to pull back and you doubled down. So that is the core concept from last week's podcast. This week, I want to talk about brand. And when I've looked at what happens during tight economies, down economies, uncertainty, recessions, whatever you want to call it, when things are not magically moving in the right direction and people are happy and they're not worried. So uncertainty, I guess, is a good way to phrase it. Brand is one of those things that, in addition to you getting people's attention at a bigger rate than your competitors, because you're going to double down, they're going to pull back. But brand is another area that you can really start to separate your business from the pack. So what do I mean about brand? Like, what does it actually mean? So I've talked in the past about doing a brand audit for yourself and your organization. And you want to deploy this brand audit before you start to do the Dream 100 outreach. So if your brand personally and for your business is not tied up in a bow, it doesn't look good, it doesn't sound good, and then you start to do outreach, you're commenting on some of those Dream 100 relationship social media, and they go to your Facebook page, your LinkedIn page, and you've got old photos and inconsistent brand, typos, like it's a mess. You're going to potentially lose out on that potential opportunity without even knowing. They're just not going to reply. As discussed, like, it takes many, many pieces of outreach. Emails, social media posts, direct messages, direct mail, gifting, phone calls. Like, it takes a lot to land those relationships. Your A game has to be brought. But when I say brand in this context, all that stuff is extremely important. Imagery, consistency, spelling and grammar. But the brand elements during a down economy that I want you to focus on are talking about things like what makes you unique and different. What makes you special? What are you doing for your team? What are you doing for the local economy, the local market, your area? How are you giving back? How are you helping your customers? What do you think about your customers? Who are your customers or clients? Brand becomes more of the human element than you may have been posting about in the past. So let's just say, for sake of argument, you own a landscaping business, and in particular, so you do the grass cutting, the weekly mowing, and that's a portion. But your bread and butter, where you really start to make the money, there's hardscapes and putting in retaining walls, and not just like the spring and fall cleanup that I get here in Buffalo, but new installations, people that want to just change everything up. Now, in a down economy, someone might second, do I really need all this new landscaping? Now, the chances are pretty high that their finances didn't magically change from one week to the other. If they were planning on doing it a week ago and then they kind of got spooked through the economy, Doesn't mean that they had $10,000 or $20,000 in an account they were going to use. That's gone now. That didn't happen. But they started to get a little bit gun shy. So maybe they still want to do it, but they go on the hunt and they're like, well, we don't know if we're going to make a decision right now. The way that I would start to improve my brand if I was in that particular business is I would talk more about beautifying someone's property, allowing them to then have more family time in their backyard, having it to where the neighbors want to come over to their house, showing pictures of not just the new landscaping, but pictures of people enjoying the new landscaping. Notice that subtlety right there. Most landscapers post before and after pictures. What they don't post is seeing the after picture with live people enjoying it, smiling. That brand element starts to bring out the emotions. And what we need to focus on over the coming months is how can we pull on the heartstrings? How can we show that we have a great emotional brand? How can we demonstrate how we're unique? But bring in that human element, bring in that unique element from talking about your team again, talking about the people you're helping, the good you're doing, and doing it from a video standpoint, do it from a picture standpoint, show this stuff so that if somebody were to go to your Facebook page as a landscaper, yes, they would see and know that you're a landscaper, but they're going to see happy families, kids playing ball in the backyard. You sponsored a little league team. They're going to see that, those kids smiling. Your uniform with the logo and the sponsorship will be in a picture, but the front and center picture is going to be the kids smiling. And a article that you write or a post that says, one of our favorite things to do is to be able to give back to XYZ Little League. For the last 10 years, we've been sponsoring teams. We're so grateful to be a part of this community. That brand element has always been extremely important, but now more than ever, you need to turn up the heat. So step one is to do that brand audit and look for all the low-hanging fruit that you might need to tweak. Look for anything that needs to get adjusted, at least at a rapid pace. Graphics, copy, content, all that stuff. Number two, I want you to look at how can you start to then further humanize it for the brand that you have. Let's say you're in one of those potentially tough industries. You're selling luxury watches. Okay, great. It's going to be a little bit tougher to convince someone if they don't necessarily need another watch. But what if you start to talk about the core story element? What if you talk about Tim that got a promotion and decided to buy his first Rolex, and he bought it as a present to himself to show that he's worked hard for the last 15 years, and eventually he wants to give that Rolex to his son? And you talk about that as the story rather than we're just a high-end luxury watch dealer. That human element, marketing and selling via stories, marketing, selling via emotions, is going to be so important in the next couple of months. And if you combine that with the first lesson of doubling and tripling down, grabbing that underpriced attention as all of your competitors have already started to pull back, you will set yourself up for being light years ahead of everyone else. Get out there, make some changes to your brand, but it's the perspective, it's how you're being perceived in the marketplace. And if you can grab that human element, I promise you, you will continue to generate business even in a down economy. Get out there, take some action. Michael Tasner signing off. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. I'll see you next week.